Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for attending. I see there are some familiar people from yesterday, so that is lovely to see you. We hope to see you this whole week. Today we have Melissa, who will be talking about academic research support. In case there is anyone who wasn't here yesterday, I am Laura Newman. I'm the Library Education and Partnerships Manager at the University of Greenwich, and I organise this CPD programme every year. And I can see we have lots of colleagues here, which is always lovely to see. As I said to Doa, some of you may not be able to access the chat. We will do our best to make sure that if anything comes up in the chat that's important, we will verbally say that as well, so you're not missing out on anything. And I will be doing chat support for Melissa as she runs the session. So we're scheduled for 2 hours, but we may finish early, but that will also include time for questions. And I'm sure Melissa would be happy for you to ask questions at any point as well, if you want to. So you should all be able to unmute your mics if you want to. Or for those of you that have access to the chat, you can also put any questions or comments in there. And then, like I said, we can share those. Okay, so I will over to Melissa, who can introduce herself.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Laura. My name's Melissa. I'm one of the librarians here at the University of Greenwich. Really nice to meet you all. I'm just having a quick look at the chat, and I can see that you're all from lots of different places, which is really lovely to see. I'm going to use a platform today for the presentation called Mentimeter. So I'm going to share my screen in a second, which will bring up the slides. With Mentimeter, this is participatory. So if you have a phone with you, then you'll be able to scan the QR code on the screen, or else you'll be able to open another browser window and log into Mentimeter. So hopefully some of you have used this software before, but I'm just going to share now, and then we can just give it a couple of minutes so that you can join the presentation. And you can ask any questions if you're having trouble doing that. So I'm just going to start the presentation now. Laura, I assume that you can see that on the screen?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, so you'll see on the screen there a slide that says academic research support. So as I say, you can either scan the QR code if you have a phone with you, or if you want to just open up another browser window, you can go to menti.com and enter the code 72599854. So I'll just give it a minute so that you can have a chance to join the Menti.
Yeah, and for those of you that attended yesterday, Mentimeter was one of the tools that Jimmy was talking about. So you get to see it in practice today if you have not used it before. So that's a lovely little follow-on, which was absolutely on purpose and not accidental.
Yeah, we use this sort of software quite a lot with the students, and we tend to find that students stay more engaged if they can also participate in the presentation. And also it means that they can have the slides on their own devices, so it's quite good for accessibility. I find it useful in large, lectures where there are lots of students and people might be too shy to kind of speak aloud in class. With Mentimeter, as you'll see, you're actually able to kind of respond to the presentation by typing things into your phone. So yeah, it's quite an inclusive sort of software. So I can see 33 people have joined. I'll just give it another minute or so that others can join. And if you are having difficulty, then just let us know. I can't see the chat, but Laura can, so you can just pop a question in if you need to. I'll wait till we get to 40 people and then I will get started. We got 3 more, we've got 37 people. So as mentioned, my name's Melissa. You can see my email address there on the first slide. So if you have any questions about anything I cover in the session, do feel free to email me. I'll be very happy to answer any of your questions. So I'm going to just start the presentation now. If you haven't joined already, you'll see the code for Mentimeter at the top of every slide. So you should be able to join as we go along. Okay, let me just exit the full screen so I can see what's going on. Okay, so today's session, as Laura said, there's kind of, well, I'm not sure actually if you said this, Laura, already, but it should have been in the information about the session. It's going to be in two parts. So the first part will actually be less than an hour. It's probably about 50 minutes, and it will be covering general academic research support. So this will be applicable to all subjects. I'm going to do a kind of general overview about how we provide support for students, and we can offer you some kind of support as well. And then we're going to have a quick break, very quick break, just as a changeover. And part two, which will probably be around 20 minutes, will be specifically for people who, like academics and who are teaching business. Because I'm the business librarian, I thought it might be useful to show you some of our specialist business resources that students can use. So everybody's welcome to come to part two, but it will be mostly applicable for lecturers who are teaching business. So that's going to be the structure of the session, and of course do interrupt if you have any questions or if there are any problems. If you want me to go over things, pop it in the chat. Laura can let me know, or you can just unmute your mic. Okay, so part one is going to be about academic research support. So that's me, Academic Services Librarian. At Greenwich, we have Academic Services Librarians for every subject that we teach at Greenwich. So my specialty is Accounting, Finance and Economics, and also the Executive Business Centre. And our roles are to support students, of course, so we see students one-to-one. We also go into classrooms and we teach students information literacy. And this is something, as I'll mention a bit later, we can offer you support with as well if you'd like us to do sessions. Obviously, there might be a time difference issue, but we've managed it today. So I'm sure that we'd be able to provide something for you if you'd like a librarian to do a session for your students. But we also provide support for staff. And so if you have any questions about, resources that students could use or like best practice that we're suggesting, then we can offer that kind of support for you. So hopefully a lot of you have signed into the Mentee now, 43 I think. So I just wanted to quickly get an overview about what programs you teach on, because while I support the business school, I realise that not all of you will be teaching in the business subject. So if you could let me know what programs you're currently teaching on, that would be really useful. Okay, so we've got hotel management education, great. Architecture, yes, so we got a real range here. So quite a few from architecture, yeah. Biostatistics, business, IT, maths. Okay, yeah, so we're running the full range here of subjects, which is great. So as I said, this first part is going to be applicable to across schools and faculties. So hopefully you will get something useful out of the first part. And for those of you, I can see there are quite a few from business, stay on for the second part and we can have a look at some of the specialist resources that your students can access. Okay, I'm just going to move
we've
the
got
slide.
a few in the chat as well, Melissa.
Okay, yeah.
So architecture, business finance, IT, computer science, business management in the chat as well.
Brilliant.
So yeah, huge range.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to move on. I wondered if you could have a look at these academic skills. So this is just like, these are 5 out of many skills that students will need to have in university. But from your perspective, what do you think are the most challenging skills for your students? You can just probably see on your screen there the 5 skills, and you should be able to rank those. So what do you think is the most challenging skill? And this could be quite difficult. I mean, they might all be challenging. What do you think though? So thinking critically is definitely the highest so far. Evaluating and choosing the best source, academic writing, referencing. Okay, yeah, referencing and using academic databases of swapping places. But it looks as though thinking critically, in your opinion, is the most challenging skill. This actually really reflects what we see here in Greenwich as well with our students. Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear that thinking critically seems to be the most challenging for our students. I just wondered, in your own degrees, before you started working in academia, how often did you seek help from a librarian with skills such as, you know, what we just covered in the previous slide? So most people occasionally, a couple frequently, yeah, couple never. I have to say that in my own degree, I never contacted my librarian, to my shame, despite becoming a librarian later in life. I think it is quite common that students don't. It's great to see that most of you occasionally did. The reason why I ask is because I think sometimes joining the dots between the sort of skills that, you know, are challenging for students and where they can get help, they're not always connected. So I just wanted to reassure your students that we are here to help. Okay, so I'm part of a wider team called the Academic and Digital Skills Team. So we are made up of librarians, so librarians like myself, but also academic skills tutors. And the tutors sort of specialize in helping students with things like thinking critically or academic writing. So, I mean, these are skills that most students don't come to the university knowing. And so we're here to support students and support you with helping students with those skills. So please remember that that help is at hand. And I've just got here some of the kind of asynchronous resources that you could potentially access from our team. So, for example, I mean, obviously the workshops that we run are in the UK, so there may not be things that your students can attend live, but we have recordings of workshops. I'm just going to click the link, and if you've logged into the Mentor, you can click it from your own phone as well. We have recordings of previous workshops. So, for example, if I go to putting together your assignment, you'll see that we have workshops on those very skills that we mentioned earlier. So thinking, critical thinking and analysis, what is critical thinking? So you can point your students in the direction of these workshops if they need some extra support, reading, evaluating your source material, writing. But as I mentioned before, us librarians, we are available to teach information skills to your students, either synchronously, so if we can work out a way that we can attend your kind of classes online at a reasonable time, then we can do that, but also asynchronously. So something that I tend to do is if a module is doing a particular assignment and perhaps students are struggling with an aspect of it, like Harvard referencing or finding data from a financial database, then I could make a short video that could be, sort of tied in with that assignment and send it to you if you think that would be useful. So I've got the email address for the team there. So if you do think that that's something you'd like to take advantage of, then please do email us and we can hopefully help you out. Okay, so that was just a bit of an introduction to our team and the kinds of support that we help with. What I wanted to talk about mostly for this session is how we support academic research in the library and some of the challenges and solutions that we have kind of come up against in the hope of starting some discussion with yourselves and, giving you some ideas if you need them. So I just wanted to kind of start by saying that what we're facing these days is a very complicated information landscape for students all over the world who we support. So these days, obviously, students have lots of options for finding information, far more than they would have had even, 5 years ago, what with the advent of AI, etc. So a lot of students are feeling overwhelmed. They don't know where to start when they're looking for information for research, etc. Obviously, evaluating that information is more important than ever, partly due to AI and the spread of misinformation. It's difficult for students to maybe make that judgment about whether the research, that the information they're using is credible. And then searching using AI, which is obviously very common these days, students using ChatGPT, or perhaps in your own countries you have a more popular AI search tool, versus using traditional academic databases, which we teach. They're very different ways of searching, as we'll cover. And academic conventions like referencing can seem, to be honest, quite irrelevant to students these days when there are lots of free reference generators online or Google Scholar. So it's a bit of an uphill battle sometimes trying to kind of help students with these sorts of skills. So that's kind of what I wanted to go into today. I just want to pause for a second. Laura, there are no questions or anything so far, or comments that I need to be aware of?
Not so far, no.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to start by talking about this one here, that students have many different options for finding information and they don't know where to start. Okay, so this is a problem that when I see students one-to-one, they come up against. They are faced with an assignment and there maybe a literature review, or they're trying to find data and they don't really know where to begin because there seems to be a multitude of options. What I've got on the screen here now is some responses that I've received from students in the last year about when I asked them the question, where do you tend to start searching for information? This is a response from a level 4 module of business students. As you can see, most of them said that they started with ChatGPT or Google Scholar. And then this is a level 6 economics module that I did in term 1. And again, you can see Google Scholar is prominent. Also Greenwich Library. Sometimes when you ask students these questions, you're not necessarily sure if they're telling you the truth or telling you what they think you want to hear. But either way, as you can see, the issue is that they are looking at lots of different kinds of places for information that work very differently. And, the way they access that information is different. For yourselves, I just wondered if you could tell me, when you do your own research, where do you tend to like to start searching for information? Do you have any preference for platforms or search tools or databases? What do you commonly start with? Google Scholar, yep. Emerald, SciSpace, yep. Google Scholar's massive, yeah. Anybody use AI tools that aren't ChatGPT? Copilot, yeah. Students actually seem to be really keen on Gemini as well, and Claude. Yeah, I'm seeing that quite a lot. Web of Science, yeah.
Yeah, we've got Google Scholar and Copilot in the chat as well. Yeah.
Okay, so as we'll kind of get on to as we progress through this, you'll see why it's complicated if a student is using, on the one hand, Copilot or something to search using natural language, and then there's someone's put Web of Science on there. If they're asked to go and search for an article in Web of Science, you're searching in a very different way. And so kind of getting students to understand the different ways of searching, the different ways that you need to evaluate information depending on the tool you're using, that can be quite complicated. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, Nabil has put in the chat, Melissa, just to say, I think it's a matter of generations. Older students tend to think differently from newer generations.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I definitely see that in the way that I might say something. I'm 47, so I guess I did grow up with the internet, but it wasn't in my childhood. I might say something like, go to Google, and the students are like, what do you mean Google? Because for them it's the younger students, it's kind of like just on their phone, they'll talk into their phone or something. There's no like www.google.com. So even the way we're teaching it, I can really see that generational divide, and it seems to be a lot bigger than it used to be, and quite hard for teachers, I think, to keep up with as well. So one of the ways that I actually tend to sort of quote unquote sell the library databases to students, and this is not to say that I tell them not to use Google Scholar and AI. I do. I think that's important that they use a combination of the tools, but they should also be using the databases, some of which I'm going to show you in a minute. And the way that I kind of encourage them to use it is that these databases are paid for by the university, so they've obviously been evaluated and selected by experts, like their lecturers, by librarians. So in terms of trying to figure out whether or not it's a high quality or credible source, they have less kind of concerns around that. If they're using library databases, they don't have to necessarily worry whether it's kind of misinformation. They obviously still need to be critical thinkers when they're using library databases, but they can have more of a sense of trust. And as I'm going to show you in a minute, this is a big selling point, is it's much easier to find peer-reviewed articles in library databases because we have filters that allow students to select for peer review, for example, whereas if they're using something like Google Scholar or ChatGPT, they have to do a lot more work to identify whether or not an article is peer-reviewed. So a lot of our students are getting assignments where they have to find like 15 peer-reviewed articles. So in terms of kind of encouraging students to use library databases, this tends to be what I say, but I also want to make it clear that they need to be using AI and Google Scholar and all the other sources in combination, because obviously that is the way the world is going. So using them in combination with each other is the best way forward. So this is the part where I'm going to do a bit of a live demonstration on our website. I just wanted to show you the two places that students can use to find library resources on the University of Greenwich portal. I know that you potentially won't have the same view of the portal as I will. So I'm just going to give you an overview and just to give you an idea about where your students can be looking. So we've basically got two places to find the library resources. We've got Library Search, which is our discovery system. It searches across pretty much all of Greenwich's article databases. So I sort of describe it as like the library's Google. So you could put in a topic search and it would look across all of our databases. And then we have individual subject guides, which is where the students can go to find specialist resources. So if they're looking for architecture resources or West law, law resources or business resources, they can have a look at their individual guides. So I just wanted to give you a demonstration of where those are. I've logged into the student portal. This is the view that I can see. As I said, I think that you probably have a different view of this. But essentially, I think your students will still be selecting My Learning when they're logged into the portal. And then the two places that I mentioned are Library Search. So I'm just going to click on the Library Search link and Digital Resources. So this is the search where they can do kind of a general search for a topic, and it will look across all of our article databases. And I'm going to show you that a bit later on. So you can see it searches articles, books, journals, and more, so conference papers, etc. It's a really good tool to use, especially if students are doing starting out on their literature review and they just want to get an idea about what kind of resources are out there that the university has subscriptions to. And the other place that I mentioned was the specialist subject guides, and you can find those under the link that says LibGuides, which is, I'm just going to scroll up to make it a bit easier. This link here, LibGuides. We have lots of different guides about lots of different things, but the subject guides, we have guides for every subject that we teach at Greenwich. So let me just pick architecture for an example. And this will also help the student know who their specialist librarian is. So in case of architecture, it's Karen. They can email the librarian. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see a link that says subject databases, where each subject librarian has kind of brought together all the resources that are relevant to their subject area, so the students can just go directly into that database. It's just a good showcase of the resources available. Now, as we're going to have a look at in part 2, when I talk about the business resources, there are some restrictions around students who are outside of the UK, what they can and can't access, but I'll talk about that a bit later. But just on the whole, these are really useful guides for students who need to look at more specialist resources. Any questions about that, or can I move on? Okay, I'll move on. So that is those find library resources on the portal. These are just screenshots of what I've just shown you. Now, the second issue that I mentioned on the complicated information landscape is about evaluation. So as I mentioned before, evaluation of information is obviously more important than ever due to students using AI, and the AI tools are kind of aggregating information from a lot of different sources. And as we know, there is a definite, uptick in spread of misinformation. So students, before they use information that they find online, whether it's from AI or Google Scholar or from a library source, they need to really have an idea about how to check for credibility, what kind of biases that author comes with, the validity of the research, etc. And so this is a question that I'm increasingly getting asked a lot by students, like how do they know if it's a good source? We have some quite old-fashioned ways really of helping students with this. You might have heard of frameworks like CRAP. There's also the SIFT framework, which is quite useful. I think this is a kind of a newish one. I'm just going to show you SIFT now. Then this is something that we can help students, it will help them kind of conceptualize how they can evaluate a piece of information they find online to make sure that it's, useful for their kind of assignment. So, for example, SIFT, this is just a page from the BBC where they talk about it. This was developed specifically as a method for spotting misinformation, and it's an acronym. So S stands for stop, so it's sort of encouraging people to, when they find something online, to stop, not necessarily just share it immediately, not necessarily comment on it straight away, move to the next step, which is the I for investigate. So who wrote it, who wrote the article or the blog post or whatever, what kind of authority do they have, are they reputable, etc. What is the platform that you're looking at? F in SIFT means find better coverage. So find another source that kind of can confirm or deny what you've just found in the original post. So this is just kind of the kind of critical search, right? So you're not just taking for granted what you found online, you're looking for other sources. And then T is for trace. So trace the claim back to the original context. And this is particularly important in the case of using AI. As I say, it aggregates information. Where did that information originally come from? Or if it's social media, can you trace it back to the original context? So these sorts of frameworks, they can really slow down the process of research, but, that's important, I think, these days. Like, I see students just kind of going online and trying to collect lots of different articles, like they're trying to make lists of things without really thinking about, like, is this information actually good or not? Just wanted to quickly test your knowledge. In terms of CRAP, which is a really, tried and true framework, I wondered if you know what the R in CRAP stands for. So the C in CRAP, we teach students it's about currency. So how old is the information that you're finding online? A is for accuracy. So how accurate, what kind of evidence does it provide? A is for authority. So who wrote it? What kind of credentials do they have? P is purpose. So does that piece of information that you found online fulfill the need that you had, your research question? But what does the R stand for? Does anybody, who knows? Is it relevance, reliability, or robustness? So reliability so far is winning. Relevance has a few. Anybody else? What do you think? Okay, so the actual answer is relevance. Okay, obviously reliability is important, and is the research robust? But in terms of the CRAP framework, this is what we use. So currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So yeah, if you're if your students are asking you how they can potentially judge information, evaluate information online, then I can recommend, using a framework like CRAP or SIFT to kind of help them. Thank you for that. And as I said, this is especially important when we're using AI. So, just to reiterate, I don't think students should only be using academic databases. I think they need to be using it in a combination with all the other tools available for them. But if they are using AI to research information, to find articles, to find books, then we need to encourage students to click the links next to the information provided in the results page, right? So obviously AI has come a long way since, 2024, I suppose, when many of us started using ChatGPT, etc. Now there usually is a link that will allow you to go back to the original source to find out where the AI got that information from. So I really emphasize to students, you must click that link so that you can evaluate it, find out whether or not it's actually, good source. A lot of AI cannot access paywalled content, so it will be accessing things that are freely available, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's lots of academic research that's open access, but the student will just need to go to that original source to evaluate it before they use it, so that they don't in themselves perpetuate that spread of misinformation by using it in their reference list. And speaking of referencing, we'll talk about that in a minute, but they need to reference where they got that information from. They're not going to be able to reference it if they don't go back to the original source and figure out who actually wrote it to begin with. I've just put a link in there. You've probably already seen this, but it's the University of Greenwich AI policy. Obviously, it can get quite kind of vague for students about what they can and can't do when they're using AI for research. Just point them to this policy, and obviously if they have any further questions, they can always contact the library and we can give them some advice. I just wanted to open up Copilot on my computer just to show you what I mean about making sure students, this is an exercise that I often do actually in class, like when I'm doing a session in a module and we're talking about AI, I might put in a prompt for students into AI like, what is the effect of well-being on student performance? I'll sort of say, if this is your research question and you're trying to find articles and you put in your prompt and then the AI tool presents you with some answers, then always make sure you have a look at these links. So we might do this, within a session, really. Which is obviously can be a little bit hair-raising because as the teacher, you've got no idea necessarily what the AI is going to show you, but it can also be quite useful because you're sort of doing it in real time. So you can click on the link and say, let's have a look at this original source, and then get the students in class with you evaluating the source to see whether or not it's credible. Obviously, in this case, it comes from Springer Nature, it's from an academic journal, but that won't always be the case. What's this one? So if it's not an academic article, then I might take students to the website and, together we might try and evaluate the source by looking at, things like the about page, etc., and then using SIFT or CRAP to decide if this is a useful source. Did someone have a question? I thought I heard something there. No? Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. So this is just an example that I wanted to show you, just to reiterate that it is still really important to remind students that that the AI tools are still hallucinating. We've all heard about hallucinations, and perhaps there is a perception that that is improving. Maybe it is, but I mean, I conducted this search about a week ago. I put in this prompt into Copilot. I'm a student conducting research on the following topic. To what extent are consumers influenced by sustainable practices of a brand or company? And in the prompt, I also said, provide academic sources from the last 5 years. So it was a relatively detailed prompt. And the results that I got, this is just a screenshot. So I think it gave me 10 sources. The first 6 articles were not particularly current. So I'd asked the past 5 years, but it had given me like the oldest articles within that 5-year kind of window. And then number 7 and number 8, the references were completely hallucinated. So I didn't even have to try very hard to get this. But these journals that you can see the references came from, Sustainability and the Journal of Cleaner Production, are real journals. But when you actually search for them in Google, the articles don't exist. So it is still really important that students just don't take the results from AI at face value, but they dig a bit deeper to make sure that what they're using is actually real. Any questions about that or anything anyone wants to comment on? Okay. So the next issue that I mentioned was that AI search tools and academic databases work very differently. So as you've just seen me do, when you enter a prompt, it is you using natural language. So it's like asking the search tool as though you would ask a friend, what is this or what is that? Academic databases, which we encourage our students to use to find articles, they work very differently. You can't use the natural language that we're used to using with generational difference as well. Databases, as I'm sure that you're aware, we're using keywords, okay, that reflect the important elements of the topic. So this really requires the student to look at the research question they have in front of them, figure out what is the question, what am I being asked, what are the important kind of elements of that question, turn them into keywords and combine them to find relevant results. So most of the academic databases that we have at Greenwich currently don't have AI functionality. I know that other universities, this is kind of trickling in more. Often they might pay more in their subscription to have an AI function. The databases that we have at Greenwich, we don't really have that. So they are just traditional academic databases, which means they'll only look for the keywords that the student puts into the search box. Okay. I'm going to show you how that works in a second using library search. And that will also kind of show you what I mentioned earlier when I'm trying to quote unquote sell the databases to students. When I'm saying it's easier for you to find peer-reviewed information on a database than Google Scholar, I'll show you how that works in a minute. So we're going to use library search, which is our tool that looks across lots of academic databases to find some articles. But I just wondered if you could help me out here. This is our question. It's what I just typed into Copilot, but we're going to use the databases to answer it. How does well-being affect university students' academic performance? If you were going to identify keywords in this research question to use an academic database, what do you think the important keywords in this research question would be? Again, this is an exercise that I do often within the class. I get students to kind of think about the research question and identify what the important words are. Yep, well-being, definitely. Well-being, student academic performance, yep. Yep, well-being, academic performance, university students, exactly. You're getting what I mean. This is obviously easy for us, but you would be quite surprised, I think. I'm often quite surprised when you do it with students, how it takes a while for them to get their head around this way of searching. So it is quite a useful exercise. Yeah, university students. Okay, let's have a go with some of the keywords that we've got here, and I'll show you how we use library search to find academic articles. So I'm going to pick the set of keywords, well-being, academic performance, and university students as the three keywords that I'm going to use to search. So I'm going to go back to library search, digital resources. So remember, this is our tool that students can use to look across many different article databases across the subjects. Now you could put all the keywords into the first box. I quite like to click advanced search, where I can put a combination of keywords into more than one box. I find it's easier for the students to kind of conceptualize the subject if they break it down like this. So I'm going to put the first keyword in here, well-being. I've already forgotten what it was, academic performance and university students. Okay. So very different to how we search in Copilot. There's a couple of things I tend to point out to students. One is putting the quote marks around a keyword that has more than one word. You've probably done this in Google as well. It makes it a more precise search. If you don't have quote marks, the database tends to look for the word academic and the word performance separately. So that's why the quote marks are there. And basically, we're asking the database to find articles, books, journals, and more that contain the words well-being and academic performance and university students. And then I'm going to click search. And then you can see we've got 1,463 results. So library search, as I said, because it looks across lots of different academic databases, it will come up with lots of different material. So there'll often be peer-reviewed academic journal articles. But if I just scroll down, we'll see if there's anything else. Okay, that one there is a conference paper. But there'll be other material in there. There might be, if there was a recent news article, let's say on the Financial Times, that might be listed. There's lots of different content. So this is where the filters come in. So you might remember I said that one of the things I try to use for students to like sell using the database to them, to say it's easier often than Google Scholar, where you have millions of results, is on the left, you'll see a filter and you can see peer reviewed is actually an option. So if they select peer reviewed and click apply, then the only results that they'll see here will come from peer-reviewed academic journal articles. So now we've got 1,257, and then the published date, they could say past, let's say 5 years. Depends on your subject area as to how old you want the results. So I've noticed in business, students tend to be told to find research no more than 5 years old, and health is often 10 years old. With humanities might be, open-ended. But the more filters they put in here, the fewer their results. So this is how they can kind of get to the more relevant results quite easily. Google Scholar does have some filters, but not as precise as what the library databases have. So then the students can see the title of the article, and then if they want to access it, they can just choose the link underneath, and that should take them directly to the academic article. So that's how library search works, and other academic databases. And you can see that, hopefully you can see that is quite different to how it worked with AI. And so these are definite skills that students will need to learn. It doesn't come naturally, normally. So that is just a screenshot of what we just did. And then the kind of final complication, I guess, that I mentioned before about, the information landscape and how things have changed, is academic conventions like referencing, right, can seem quite irrelevant to students. When there are like free reference generators available online, often a student can just put the DOI of an article into MyBib or, a website like that, and it will generate a reference for them. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, except for the fact that at Greenwich we have a particular tool that we use called Cite Them Right, that we ask students to kind of adhere to when they're referencing. And I'm going to show you Cite Them Right in a minute. So if they're using lots of different kind of online sources to generate their references might be a bit inconsistent. I find when I'm asked to come and teach students about referencing, that teaching them why we're doing it, as well as how to do it, can really help them to avoid accidental plagiarism. So students are often just, they find referencing really tedious. They don't know why you have to put the full stop there, or, make this italics, etc. And I talk about it like, when they're writing the academic research, they're entering the academic conversation, right? So their research is part of that conversation, and the conversation has a language of its own, and that language is, partly structured by referencing. So that's why we're so strict about, everything needs to be consistent. That if you're taking stuff, your research is building on other people, you need to own other people's research, and you need to give those people credit for their research. So I do tend to spend at least the first kind of half of my referencing sessions talking about why it's important. If they don't know, then plagiarism can occur really easily. They can be copying and pasting stuff from AI and not really think about it. My colleague recently told me that her kind of technique is, if she's reading through a student's essay and they're not sure where to put the in-text citation, If they put, a statement like, I don't know, they put a statement basically, she will look at them and say, how do you know the answer to the statement? Like, how do you know that this is true? And then they'll say, oh, well, I read it in this book. And she's like, well, that's where the reference goes. So, students can kind of not really realize that the stuff they're regurgitating, they need to actually think critically, of course, not just regurgitate it, but also provide credit for where it came from. Getting them to read it out loud actually is quite useful, because then they can see where the in-text citation should go. So the how of it is really important. The why, the why of it is really important. The how to do it, this is where Cite Them Right comes in. Okay, so this is the guide that I mentioned that we tend to promote at the University of Greenwich rather than other online kind of reference generators. I'm going to show you how to find Cite Them Right. Again, your view of the student portal and your student's view will be different from mine, but I can give you some advice about where to find it. And this covers all referencing styles, Harvard, Vancouver, Oscola, etc. So if I'm just go back to the student portal, and I'll show you where to find Cite Them Right.
Sorry to interrupt, Melissa.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat about whether Cite Them Right is free or not.
So it's a subscribed resource that the university pays for. So the student can't find it outside of the university. So they have to be logged into the student portal in order to access it. Okay, so it's something that
it will depend on your student's access, basically. If they have a university login and they can log in through the portal, then they should be able to access Cite Them Right.
So there's two places to look for it. You can either look in that subject guide that I mentioned before, in your own specialist subject guide, or there's a link, online databases and academic journals, which I'm fairly sure most of your students will be able to see. And then, sorry, I'll just log in. The online databases and academic journals link takes you to an A to Z. And if they click on C for Cite Them Right, they can find Cite Them Right online here. So it's listed with all the other kind of subscribed databases. So I'm just going to select that link, and they'll probably need to sign in. So I'm on campus right now, so it's automatically signed me in, but the students will probably need to sign in, say they're from the University of Greenwich. I guess, as Laura said, it does depend on your students' access. Once they're in Cite Them Right, they can then choose the referencing style that you've set for them to use in their assignments. So I'm just going to click Harvard. And then the way it works is the student will choose the kind of source that they're trying to reference. So, for example, a journal articles. And the thing that really annoys students is that it's not going to generate the reference for them. It's not something they can pop a DOI in and then it will create it for them. It is a guide. Okay, so this is teaching them how to reference. So it will show students, this is what your in-text citation should look like, and this is what the reference at the end should look like. If they want to practice, Cite Them Right does have an editable box on the right-hand side. So if they had a journal or a book or a website that they wanted to reference, then they could put all the details in here. And then once they've filled it in, as long as they keep the format exactly as Cite Them Right has it here, they can click copy and put that into their essay. So Cite Them Right really is a teaching tool, teaching them how to do the referencing. The thing that we find that students get quite confused about is the type of source that they're referencing. So what format is it? Is it a website? Is it a financial report? Because everything's online, it can be difficult for them to distinguish what is what. So with particular articles, we talk a lot about is what the DOI means. This is how you can identify a journal article. To be honest, it can get quite grey, and I tend to say to students, if you're unclear what it is that you're referencing, send me a link and then I can give you some advice. So for example, I mentioned financial reports. If your students are asked to reference a financial report, that actually in Harvard anyway comes under research. And then under reports, if I open that up, you'll see there's company annual reports, financial reports from online databases, market research reports. So it really breaks it down into, you know, the different kinds of formats or sources that they might be using. But that tends to be what trips them up, is the format. Yeah. So so that's the guide. Cite them right online. Again, you can access it from this individual subject guide or from that online databases A to Z link that I mentioned. Okay, so that's sort of the end of part one, really. So I've just hopefully covered for, you know, a range of academic skills and challenges that I'm sure that you've all experienced, and how we can support students with it, how we can provide support for you if you feel that you would like some. Just to kind of end by saying, you know, do encourage students to use what they can access of the University of Greenwich's library resources. I actually do have a slide for part two, but I might just bring it up now because it might be useful for all of you, that we have a summary of access rights, which maybe Laura might be useful to pop into the chat. This is a list of all the databases that Greenwich has access to, so not just business, but everything. And it will tell you which ones your students can use depending on whether you're an overseas partner or a UK partner, etc. But obviously there will be resources from us that they can use. So do make sure that you encourage them to use our resources. Support the use of AI, but do encourage critical thinking and evaluation skills. And again, if you need our help with that, then we're very happy to make short videos, you know, do synchronous classes, etc. We're here to help. So that's the end of part one. Does anybody have any questions before we have a quick break and get on to part two?
I'm just going to jump in quickly while we wait and see if anyone has questions. Just to say, as Melissa said, we are very keen to support the partners, so that is both the staff and the students, more. And so we would love it if you get in touch and arrange for us to run a session for your students. Like Melissa says, we know there's a time difference a lot of the time, so it doesn't necessarily have to be live. We could have a recording for you, but obviously you are already doing so much to support them, so this is where we can help out. So please do get in touch if you think that's something you'd be interested in. You can get in touch with me or Melissa, and we can arrange for that. And like Melissa said, we have librarians who specialize in the different subjects, so there will always be someone who will be able to help. So please do let us know if that's something you would like to take us up on for the next academic year.
I'm just going to share the screen again to bring my email address up just in case you need it. And we also have a little feedback form for part one. And I'm just going to, I think we could have like a couple of minutes, no more than that, break while people sort of think about any questions or log off if you're not a business academic. Business academics, stay on. We're going to do 15 to 20 minute session on specialist business resources. Obviously, anybody who wants to stay is very welcome to, but I will only be covering the business resources for now. So yeah, any questions, let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much.
There's a comment in the chat about accessing a specific subject guide. I'm not sure if that was something, Abdullah, that you wanted Melissa to just demonstrate again really quickly.
Did you want me to look at a specific, yeah. So the subject guides, okay, so again, obviously with the caveat that your view may be different from my view, but if I'm just going to go to the University of Greenwich student portal and select my learning.
Yeah, you can also go to them directly. I'll put a link in the chat.
Yeah, and click on LibGuides. Yeah, exactly. So if you want to put that link in. The subject guides is this grey box on the bottom left. and you can select a guide. So if you have a specific guide you'd like me to look at, then let me know. We're going to look at the business one in about a minute. So if you're a business academic, then you can stay on.
Okay, so while we're pausing, in case anyone is leaving us before the second part, just a reminder that these webinars are running for the next 2 days. So tomorrow we will be talking about academic integrity and Gen AI and how to talk to your students about that. So that will be tomorrow's webinar, and then Thursday's webinar we will be looking at accessible and engaging teaching. So ways to, again, try and ensure your students are engaged in your teaching and that they are paying attention and getting the most out of their education. So those are the 2 remaining sessions this week, which are at the same time. So hopefully we will see you for those, just as a little prequel in case anyone is popping off at this point. Noah, you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I just have a question regarding the evaluation forum, because yesterday when I opened the link, it was commenting, I believe, on all the sessions. So should I wait until attending the 4th sessions and then doing the evaluation, or every day we will do the evaluation for separate sessions?
It's entirely up to you. If you want to do it on each individual session, we would absolutely love that, just because it gives us more feedback. But of course, we don't want to give you too much work to do. So if you'd rather just do it once and be done with it at the end of the week, then obviously that's entirely fine as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, shall I get started with part 2 then, the business resources? Hopefully, if you've taken that minute to have a little comfort break. This isn't going to last very long. I just wanted to demonstrate some of the resources available to business students, because sometimes they don't know, and we want them to make sure that they take advantage of what we have to offer. So just to reiterate, this is most useful for business academics, but obviously everybody is welcome to stay on if they want to. So just as a reminder, we have academic services librarians for every subject, and my subject that I specifically support is accounting, finance and economics. We will have a new librarian shortly who will be covering business operations and strategy and management and marketing. But yeah, we have librarians for everything, and we support students and staff alike. So that's my email address. If you have any questions about, the kind of business information literacy support that you need help with, then get in touch. Okay, so I'm basically going to do this as a demonstration, and I'm going to show you the Greenwich Business School Guide. So that's the specific guide that we use, where I basically gathered together all the resources that are useful for a student. Because what we find is that, what I mentioned earlier in the session is that students get quite overwhelmed by information. They're not sure where to go. The guides here make it easy. It's a one-stop shop. They can go to the guide and know exactly what resources are useful for their subject area. So in terms of the subject guide list, business subjects come under the Greenwich Business School. So we've just put all the business subjects, whether it's management and marketing or finance or, business analytics, etc., under the Greenwich Business School Guide. So I'm going to click go. On the first page of the guide, they can see my contact details, so they're very welcome to email me, or you can email me with questions if you'd like. The important sort of menu options on the left here, well, finding resources is kind of a general link that will kind of explain a little bit about how to use keyword searching to find articles, so kind of general support. But the subject databases link is what I wanted to show you today, because this is where the business resources are listed. Now, I just wanted to go back to my Menti for a second, because again, just to reiterate, you might want to check out the summary of access rights. I think Laura's posted it into the chat, just to see what your students can and can't access. So for example, there are some financial resources that I know overseas students don't have access to, but hopefully we provided some alternatives. So what is listed here is what UK-based Greenwich students can access. The way we've divided it up is kind of roughly by source, depending on what the student needs. So the first tab is the journal articles tab, and we have 2 recommended major business databases where students can find academic literature, academic journals, but also trade publications and newspapers. So that's ABI Inform, which is a ProQuest database, and Business Source Premier, which is an EBSCO database. So I'll just select those so you can see what they look like. And similar to library search, which I demonstrated earlier, the student can either just use the basic search or they can click on advanced search to combine their keywords. That's the same with pretty much every literature database. This is Business Source Premier. So they can choose advanced if they want to combine keywords. Business Source Premier has got quite a nice interface. So as well as doing their own search, they can actually browse. So if I just scroll down here, you'll see there are featured business magazines, and they've actually divided this up into subject areas. So if you want your students to kind of know what some of the top journals are in accounting and finance, they could click that link and see a list of journals in that specific subject area. They can also browse things like SWOT analyses, industry reports, etc. So if I just click on SWOT analyses, you'll be able to see what that looks like. So I quite like the Business Source Premier journal database because of these kinds of quite user-friendly functions. So if they were looking for SWOT analyses, healthcare, then it will list companies that have SWOT analyses written about them that the student can access if they want an example of a SWOT analysis, or if they're doing a company report, for example. So I've just searched for the AstraZeneca SWOT analyses. Some of them can be quite recent. You can see this comes from June 2026. So this is just an example of the kind of content that you can access from these databases. So it's a company profile. So yeah, there's a couple of ways that they can search. Either they can use their own keywords and search for exactly the thing that they're researching, or they can use these kind of icons down here and just sort of browse by their topic of interest. So that was Business Source Premier and ABI Inform. And of course, we have other journals as well. So if I scroll down further, we have one, Hospitality and Tourism Complete. This is a collection of journals, obviously focused on that topic. Emerald Insight, I think someone mentioned earlier that they use Emerald quite a lot. So if you want to go directly to the Emerald Publisher Journal Collection, then you can access that. Students can access that, and they can find Emerald journals, books, case studies, etc. So the way that I usually teach this is just to tell students that the publisher databases down here tend to be more academic or just academic, whereas these recommended databases, it's not just academic journals, but it's also news, trade publications, and other really important but non-academic sources. So that's why I tend to start them on the bigger databases first, so they get a good overview. And then in terms of the kind of bibliographic databases, we have Scopus and Web of Science as well. So that's the journal articles. News sources, this is really important because the university has a subscription to the Financial Times, which is really popular with many students. I get quite a lot of requests actually from students in Vietnam about the Financial Times. We have a little bit of registration process that they need to do the first time. So this is why it's quite useful to point them to the guide, because we have those instructions. So when they initially click on the Financial Times link, what they need to do the first time is to register, okay? And they'll need to use their Greenwich email address to register. And once they've done that the first time, they should, next time they go in, they can just enter their email address and password and access the FT. I'm just going to do that now. Hopefully I can remember my password, because there's quite, it's not just news that we tend to point students in the direction of with the FT. We also show them financial data which could be quite useful for any of your students that don't have access to databases like Orbis. So once the student has accessed the FT, obviously they can get access to all the news articles. They can also download the app to their phone and log in with their student login. But kind of, I think, more unexplored aspect of the online version of the FT is the markets data section. So this is what I wanted to show you. So this is financial data. So if they go to markets data, they can get access to stock market data. And they can also use a screener. It's a relatively basic one, but they can create, data tables of specific countries or companies that they're interested in if they're looking for markets data. So I just wanted to point that out because that's quite a useful element of the FT that you might want to point out to your students. So again, that comes under news sources. And then we have other news sources linked here as well if they'd like to explore those. Videos and case studies. If you would like students to find case studies, then you could use Emerald or Sage. Okay, so that's the databases of case studies. But what I wanted to mainly talk about was this one here, which is Business and Management Collection from Henry Stewart Talks. If you would like to embed videos or case studies into, say, your Moodle pages or learning materials, you can do that from HS Talks. So let me see if I can give you an example. I'll just go down to the featured talks. So there's lots of different kind of business and IT type topics. So let's say prompt engineering for AI in marketing and sales. I'll just click on this. So essentially, it's a little bit like LinkedIn, I guess, though it's more kind of like small presentations. But this is, you can see this link here, embed in course or own notes. So you can actually take stuff from this database and embed it into your own teaching materials if you want to. So some of these are more like courses and some of these, like this one here, are more like talks. So that was the top one here, Business and Management Collection, HS Talks. Financial, company and economic data. So Orbis, unfortunately, which you probably know of, is a company database that students and staff in our overseas partner institutions cannot access. So I'm not going to show you Orbis, but I am going to show you the London Stock Exchange Group platform Workspace, which students can use as an alternative.
Melissa, just to say, there was a question about icons as to whether we'd still provide access.
So Icon has changed its name to Workspace. So that's what I'm about to show you now. So that happened, well, basically the Icon platform was retired and it became Workspace, but it's essentially the same thing. The difference with Workspace and Icon is the way that students sign up for it. So that's kind of what I wanted to spend some time showing you now. So they can access it from here, but on the menu option you'll see on the guide, there's actually a whole section on LSEG Workspace. And the reason for that is it's a slightly complicated registration process, but hopefully we've made it as clear as possible. Essentially, the University of Greenwich has a limited number of licenses now. So we have 50 licenses. And these are shared across the whole of the business school, both the UK and overseas. But the thing with the 50 licenses is that they only last for 48 hours. So a student or staff member might use it for 48 hours, then it will expire and it will go back in the pool. So this is how we're keeping the 50 licenses kind of flowing around the university, if that makes sense. But the registration instructions are here. Okay, so I have it in video format as well if you would like a demonstration. But essentially, the student will have to go to the self-registration portal and create a login with their .gre.ac.uk email address. Once they've registered, they'll get to create a password, and that will be their same password throughout. Then they can access Workspace and log in. The only time that won't work is if all 50 licenses are being used at that time, and then they'll get an email to say you'll need to try again. And usually I recommend just trying the following day, because they are constantly expiring. When other people's licenses are expiring, it goes back in the pot. The student can just try again. We very rarely have times when all 50 licenses are being used, but we do have sort of peak periods, usually around, is it about October, Laura, where we might have 50 being used every day?
Yeah, I think late October, early November tends to be very busy with assignments.
But yeah, as I say, because they only last 48 hours, then the student should definitely try again. If it's a quiet period, they can actually renew it. So if 48 hours isn't long enough, then we have instructions for how they can renew their license further if they want to. This is for how to access the web version of Workspace, which I'll show you in a second. But just to say, they can also access DataStream if they download Workspace to their computer and use the installed version on their computer. Then that will mean they have the Excel plugin as well, so they can use DataStream if they're looking for time series data. If they want DataStream, when they sign up for Workspace, it might take an extra 6 hours to get access because it's a manual application of DataStream. But if they're just using Workspace without DataStream, then usually they get access within an hour. So hopefully that makes sense, but do come to the web page and have a look at the registration details if you need any help. I'm just going to quickly access it. I say quickly, I'll need to log in a few different places just to give you an example of what Workspace looks like. But if you've ever used Icon before, it will look very familiar. So I've logged in with my own GRE website, email address and password. And now I'll just enter the code they've sent me. So as with Icon, you get lots of different panels with different information which you can personalize. And I believe, though I actually can't say for sure, but I think if you log in again, so obviously you've used Workspace once, if you log in again in a month's time with your login, I think that your personalizations will stay. I think that's the case. Maybe don't quote me on that though, actually. But essentially the main kind of menu options are along the top here. So if you were looking for, I don't know, for example, if you want students to look at the FTSE 100, then they can click on equity indices, see a lot of different equity indices here, including the FTSE. They can get access to a list of companies that make up that index, and then they could do research on individual companies. I'm just kind of flicking through just to give you an example of the kind of data that's there. And you'll see obviously the data is constantly updating because this is live. So I just accessed the FTSE 100 list of companies. So data sets like this, students can export as Excel spreadsheets or PDFs if they can see the icons along the top there. As well as using the menu options along the top, they can just use the search bar. So say they were looking for a company like Apple, they could just search for the company Apple, go into the company details. And one really useful thing that we found that students love about Workspace is that they can get ESG data about their company. So any company that they search for will have the same menu options along the top. And ESG, for example, is one of those options that many students are using at the moment. So they can do like peer analyses and things like that. So that was just obviously a very quick whistle stop to it, just so that you know what I'm talking about when we're talking about Workspace, and just to remind you that they will need to read this information to register, getting help. Generally, I can't provide specialist help, but I can provide navigational help. What I've linked to here is the Workspace Learning Centre, which students, once they've created a login, they can access it. And I would highly recommend they do that, because LSEG actually has lots of short videos, but lots of different things that you can do with Workspace, so they can actually kind of help themselves using the Learning Centre. We do have problems, and so I've got problems in FAQ section. So they may receive emails like registration failure, which, you know, as I said, could be because all 50 licenses are being used. They might get error messages. This is happening quite a lot for students who are going into Workspace a lot, and they tend to need to clear their cache before Workspace will work again. So if they have any questions, point them in the direction of the FAQs page first. But of course, if they can't get the answer, then they can email me and I can pass that on to LSEG. And usually they're quite good at answering our questions. And then finally, I have a short video. If you just want students to find company information, then I've made a Panopto video screencast here so they can watch that from the guide. So that's Workspace. I hope that's helpful. The person who asked about Icon, if you have any questions about Workspace, let me know now, or feel free to email me. The last section I wanted to look at was market and industry research and advertising. Now, unfortunately, Mintel, which is quite a popular one with students here, is not available to our overseas partners, but Passport is, which is a Euromonitor database where students can get industry information and get information about consumers, you know, demographics, lifestyle data, all that kind of stuff. So that's under the market and industry research tab. We have the WARC, World Advertising Research Centre. So if they need any case studies on, brand profiles or advertising campaigns, then this is a really good database to use. And then I'd mentioned before, you can access Cite Them Right from the guides as well. So I've got a referencing tab where Cite Them Right is listed. So those are kind of the major resources that I wanted to make you aware of. So the large article databases, particularly ABI Inform and Business Source Premier. For the financial and economic data, I would recommend Workspace in the first instance because it's got so much information on there, very detailed. They can make very detailed data sets. But don't forget about the Financial Times, FT, because it does have some markets data. And then in terms of market intelligence and industry reports, then Euromonitor Passport is your best bet. And just to reiterate, I am available if you need my help in running any live training sessions on how to use the resources or, you know, create a short video. And it's really effective if it's timed with a specific assignment because it kind of helps the student, it sticks in their brain a bit better if it's something that they need to do straight away. And do direct them to the subject guide because there's such a lot of information that they can access from there. And I really want them to make use of everything that we have. Okay, so that is the end of part 2. As I said, it was going to be a shorter one. I'm just going to stop sharing now.